Morning, everyone. I am so excited to see this many people here bright and early, 8:30 a.m., site neutral payments. This is going to be, this is a good morning.
We have an overflow crowd out there. Respect to this audience.
For those on the camera, there really is an overflow in this room right now. So thank you all for being here. And thank you, Kevin, for the introduction. I'm thrilled to be here with John Arnold, the co-founder of Arnold Ventures, and the sponsor of our event today. So John, thank you first for making the conversation happen today and also for being here.
And thank you for Politico for organizing this event. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So we all know this is a really timely conversation. We had a no vote this week on the bill. Lots to be coming on that we're going to dive into. But to give you all a little bit of background, so Arnold Ventures tackles a lot of huge pressing problems focused on evidence-based policy solutions. So some of those categories, John, as I understand them, criminal justice, education, public finance, and then of course the topic at hand this morning, healthcare. So we've got a lot to discuss. Excited to jump in. I want to, John, take a step back and talk a little bit as a philanthropy. Arnold Ventures is really focusing on areas where perhaps public and private sector is really falling short. And before we dive into the healthcare piece of this today, would love you to scene set for the audience here. How is the philanthropy sector uniquely positioned to help solve some of these issues? Tell us a little bit more about the scope of Arnold Ventures and how you all are playing a role in solving some of these issues today.
Great. So I think it's, and ironically, best to tell our story by telling somebody else's story. So if you give me a minute, I saw this great presentation last week by Bill Gurley, a legendary VC investor, entitled 2,851 miles, and that's the distance between Silicon Valley and DC. And he tells the story of investing in a free Wi-Fi company and got a lot of excitement by mayors and a lot of excitement by a Philadelphia mayor. He goes there and then finds out that Philadelphia is also the home of Comcast. And so although there was so much excitement by people in Philadelphia, by the mayor, 6 months later, there was a bill passed in the Pennsylvania state legislature banning any city from doing free Wi-Fi. Right? And then he tells a story about telecom equipment and about electronic medical records. And his takeaway from this was the regulatory capture that happens within legislatures, within the policy-making sphere. And so the venture capital space has kind of backed away from these areas that are highly regulated and is trying to do the Ubers of the world, going around regulation, the AI where regulation doesn't exist. His mission is maximize investor return. Right? Our mission is maximize opportunity and minimize injustice. So we see the same thing, that power of special interests, the regulatory capture that happens both in DC and at state houses. But because we have this different mission, we've jumped in. We try to play the inside game. And so that's how we get drawn into these issues. And our goal is to be the counterweight, that we don't want these issues determined just by those with special interests. There's a lot of the areas we work in have this characteristic of concentrated benefits and diffuse cost. Right? And so there's a small set of firms that are very, very interested in the policy outcome, and everybody else is paying the cost for that, either directly from their pocketbook or indirectly through deficit spending that translates into inflation. And so we try to be that counterweight and provide tension in the system. And the way we do it is kind of that full spectrum of how do you define the problem, how do you come up with ideas about how to solve it, where can we pilot the potential solutions to it, a deep research agenda as to what that means. And then we also get into the advocacy and politics of it, because we know like those firms that are benefiting, those special interests, right? That's the game plan they're playing. And so we're trying to be the counterweight. And so whether it's in healthcare costs or criminal justice or higher ed accountability, creating a K-12 system that works, public finance system that makes sure that people get their benefits, but minimizes waste, fraud, and abuse, et cetera. That's the type of area that gets us drawn in and how we address it.
So taking that lens then and thinking about those different regulatory frameworks, as we're now going to zero in more on healthcare. What are the greatest issues that you think the healthcare system is facing, particularly as it relates to addressing rising costs, a huge topic of today's event?
Yeah, so we fund this project, I think it's called the 1% Steps to Healthcare Reform Project. It needs a new name, but it's a group out of Yale, Fiona Scott-Morton and Zach Cooper. And their premise, which we agree with, obviously, is that healthcare is a lot of 1% problems. Right? And so there's no magic bullet, silver bullet, do this and we're going to save 25% in the system, at least within the realm of politically viable solutions. So if you were starting the system from scratch, you would end up in a very different place. But right now, it's a bunch of 1% solutions. So even within pharmaceuticals, there is a policy response for uncompetitive generic drugs in the Part D market. Right? And we've been involved in this with the creation of Civica RX. There's a different policy response for competitive branded drugs paid for by the VA. Right? They negotiate and give all their market power, use their market power to get the cheapest cost. Or uncompetitive branded drugs in Medicaid. And so like each of these things is like a 1% problem within the system. And certainly kind of within hospital costs, which is about a third of total healthcare spending, you get to the same issue where it's a lot of little 1%. So this has two ramifications. One is that anytime you start pushing on one of those 1%, they say, why are you picking on us? Right? We're tiny. Like, deal with the other 99%. But unless you sit there and do the 1%, you're not going to make any progress. And I think the second ramification is our healthcare team at Arnold Ventures has very good job security because we're just bouncing from one issue to the next. And so, I think in broad, like we're trying to make sure that that the gains that we can have by addressing these 1% make it to the consumer, make it to the patient, and make it to government so that we can use that money in more effective, more efficient solutions.
So I'm curious, John, how do you, we looked recently at Medicare through the Inflation Reduction Act. There were negotiations to essentially around the costs for 10 prescription drugs. And there's been some pushback, which I think is sort of at the tension that's at the heart of this issue, which is how do you lower prices, still ensure access and quality of care, incentivize innovation? How do you think we strike a balance with all of this?
But thank you for that question, because I find this to be kind of the biggest crock of nonsense, these talking points. Feels like that Comms 101 in DC is anytime that there's a proposal that touches your industry, the first line is, that will destroy us. That will destroy the industry. There could be a proposal, you have to put M&Ms in the waiting room of every pharmaceutical office. And the industry would come out and say, that will destroy innovation, that will destroy the industry. So I think stepping back, let's talk about what the goals of the pharmaceutical industry are. Right? And the goals aren't just innovation. The goals are, how do you maximize patient outcomes? Right? And that's a combination of access and innovation. If you have a system that has 100% innovation and 0% access, that's failure. Right? Vice versa, like 100% access and 0% innovation, right? That doesn't lead to to good results either. And so the question is, how do you find the balance here? And one of the things that the IRA did was by creating this out-of-pocket cap, the $2,000 out-of-pocket cap for Part D drugs, right, greatly increases access by those who need it. And so then the question is, what's the ramification on innovation? And again, I think this is like the industry making these claims, but the facts just don't align with that. So whatever way you look at this, you can look at CBO estimated how many drugs would not come to market over the next 30 years. And I think their number was 13. So 13 drugs over 30 years. 13 out of 1,300 drugs that they expected to come to market. So 1%. And those 1%, like those are not the most innovative drugs. Right? Those are going to be the Me Too drugs that don't have the innovation that are there because they're often in a protected class and they have to be covered, et cetera. So they're good revenue, but they're not necessarily good for patients. We see Novo Nordisk, with their drug that kind of fell into their lap with Wegovy, right, which was originally a diabetes drug and now a weight loss drug. Their market caps increased $200 billion over the past year as the ramifications of this drug make its way to the market. Right? There is tremendous incentive for innovation in this market before the IRA and after the IRA. So you can look at it from number of drugs. You can look at it from revenues. The projections from consultants are estimating that 2030 revenues of this industry is somewhere between $2.5 and $3.2 trillion. Right. Now, what did the CBO score the savings? The negotiation starts 2026. It's about $5 billion. In 2030, the savings are estimated to be $24 billion. Sounds like a lot, right? But $24 billion out of a $2.5 trillion market is less than 1%. Right? So again, not affecting innovation. And then third, think about not what pharma is saying, but what are their actions. And so Brookings went and looked at what's the M&A been in the industry both before IRA and after IRA. And there's been more purchases of drug companies by the big pharma after the IRA than before. And I have a list here. Right? Pfizer bought Seagen for $43 billion, big premium. Astellas bought Iveric, Merck bought Prometheus, Eli Lilly bought Dice, all at least 40% premiums to market. So again, they're saying one thing, but their actions are saying something different. And I'll close by just saying there are groups of organizations. You can put hospitals in here, you can put pharma, universities, who do good things, right? They're critical to having a vibrant society. Right? And they can always tell the story about how they need more resources. Harvard has a $50 billion endowment, and yet they have a fundraising team that goes around and says, if you give us a little bit more money, here are all the good things we can do. Right? Hospitals will do the same thing. If you give us a little bit more money, this is what we can do. And this is what's happening with pharma. And then the question is we can't do infinite spending in any of these areas. And so what's the right balance? Where can they still be using resources in a manner that, at least in the pharma space, and it maximizes access and innovation?
So you touched on hospitals a bit at the end there, and I want to just zero in a bit on that piece. So, we have a study that says 4 in 10 American adults have delayed needed health care due to cost, and 14% reporting that they have just skipped a hospital visit altogether. As you think about Congress and where maybe some of that balance can happen, what do you think are some of the most promising policies you've seen to date that can help bring that down, help to address the high hospital prices as we think about Congress?
So our work in healthcare started in pharmaceutical pricing kind of almost 10 years ago. But then we quickly realized that we needed to get into hospital pricing. And the hospital market is, as I said, about a third of total spending. But it too ends up in this 1% problem. And so there's a lot of different avenues one can go within hospital pricing. You can think about payment models or transparency, the commercial prices or market power. But one of these is definitely site neutral and that we've chosen to work in. I come from the world of finance, which, like healthcare, is enormous amount of regulation to it. Right? And whenever firms in finance kind of get around the spirit of the rules, they get hit with very large fines. Right? $10 million, $10 billion even, right? To try to get them back. Here's the spirit of the rules. You're outside of that. And all these firms are so scared to fight a case against the SEC or another regulatory agency in courts that they settle, change their business practices, and move on. Right? What I'm amazed at in the healthcare space, again, approaching this as an outsider, is when that same thing happens, Congress and the regulators then spend 10 years thinking about, should we do something? Right? And during that time, right? This practice gets baked into the standard operating procedures of the industry. And then when Congress finally gets around to it and says, maybe we should close that loophole that was found, then the actors say, no, you can't do that. Like, it'll destroy the industry. And so, in my mind, hospitals found this arbitrage with regards to site neutral. Right? That is, that there's reasons why hospitals get reimbursed higher for some procedures that have to take place in their offices rather than being done at the doctor's office. Right? And so that policy made sense when it was first created. Hospitals then, are clever and they're business people, and they say, hey, wait, we can go buy some doctor's practices, put them under our billing code, have the same procedure done off-site, and get a higher reimbursement for it. And whenever people hear that story, everybody I've talked to, Republican, Democrat, people in politics, people outside say, yeah, that's crazy. Why don't we reverse it? And so that's why we're here, right? That's why Congress is thinking about very close to passing this bill. It's going to help patients, it's going to help taxpayers, and it closes this loophole that should never have existed.
So, John, as we close, I would love to know, are you optimistic that we can ultimately get there with some of these bills in Congress? To your point, there's bipartisanship around the bill. We're hoping for momentum there in the next couple weeks. But how optimistic are you with such a divided Congress? We're facing a potential shutdown. Do you think we can get there?
Yeah. So always optimistic. You have to be in this line of work. I was on the Hill yesterday, and I'm sitting in a Senate office in the waiting room, and you see the parade of people come out. It's kind of a very fascinating place to sit for a while. The American Red Cross comes through, and then you have the Potato Growers Association. And it struck me that almost everybody coming through that office, right, number one is trying to do something to help their cause. Most frequently, they're asking for more resources or trying to justify why more money can help their issue. And one of the unique things about Arnold Ventures is we kind of put this constraint where the vast majority of our work is, how can we have the system work better at no added cost or even a savings to the system? And so in 2019, there wasn't a lot of demand for things that saved money. In 2023, there is huge demand for things that save money. And so what we can offer to policymakers, and there is very broad bipartisan appeal to this today, is the pay-fors to fix things and that need to get fixed, to pay for new things. And so again, because there is such broad appeal on this issue with regards to that it doesn't seem right, nobody thinks that this, buying the doctor's practices and jacking up the rates is right policy, that this fix has a lot of appeal. And even within the bill that was kind of supposed to go to a vote on Monday, and we think will come back up very shortly, that $4 billion that was the pay for, right, was kind of being recycled back to hospitals, both through community health clinics as well as to pay for, there was a Medicaid hospital expenditure that was roughly $4 billion. So this money is being recycled, kind of going from some of the haves of the hospitals to the have-nots. And obviously Congress thinks this is, and we agree, that this makes the system more equitable, provides more access to healthcare, and more properly aligns the reimbursement schedule to what the interest and goals of society are. And so with that, again, I think this bipartisan appeal is going to come back up, and the legislation this week is a good first step to go try to address the site neutral issue.
Well, I'm glad we're ending on an optimistic note. To your point in the line of work, it's important. So, John, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to Arnold Ventures for supporting the conversation. And thank you all again for coming out so early this morning and being a fantastic audience. I'm excited to hand it over to our next panel and enjoy the rest of your morning.